All right, MCE crew, we have a very special guest with us this evening. Evening for me, evening for him. We're not that far away. We're in the same state. Matt Rutherford. Now, in case you have not heard that name, I really want you to remember it. I don't think you're going to have any problem after this interview because for me, Matt is right up there with uh, Charles Lindbergh, and that's no exaggeration. Admiral Byrd, Magellan, all those guys. Okay, for me, and I'm sure he will achieve the same status here for you after we talk about his incredible feat. Uh, just to give you an overview, Matt is the only man. And again, you're in the Guinness Book of World Records, correct?
Yep.
Only man to circumnavigate the Americas solo by sail. Okay. For anybody out there who's ever been sailing or on the water, uh, or maybe those of you who haven't, you can understand the feat that this was. So we want to jump right into it. Now, the reason we're having him on Money Changes Everything is because not just for what he did on the water, but the motivation behind it. He got up and he made something happen. And in our business lives and in our investing lives, these are the types of characteristics we really need to adopt if we're going to achieve goals. So let's get into talking about the incredible goal that Matt set and how he achieved it. How you doing, Matt?
Well, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for agreeing to come on. Now, let's just go back before the actual voyage. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, we're going to link to the documentary because we definitely want people to check that out also. Uh, but coming up like so many young people, get into a little trouble. And tell us a little bit about that. How, you were lacking in direction for a little bit there.
Yeah, I guess in the early days, right? So I, it becomes a lengthy explanation, but I grew up originally in a Christian-based cult that had a lot of Eastern religious influence. So there was a cult leader. In my case, was a woman. Most cult leaders we think of are men, David Koresh or any of that kind of stuff. And it's just what you know. It's just what you grow up around, and if everybody tells you this is reality, then you believe it. And so at some point around 10 years old, we got out of the cult, but we never really talked about it much. It was kind of like the glue that held my parents' relationship together was that cult leader. And so once that was removed from their relationship, everything started falling apart. It's a kind of a wrenching situation because you're not allowed to have friends outside of the cult. And my dad recovered relatively quickly. He played the violin. He got into like Irish rock bands, all that kind of stuff. My mom never really recovered proper, but they were so busy dealing with the fallout of that we never really talked about it. We never discussed it, and I didn't deal with it very well. I mean, I think some people might have dealt with it better. Maybe some people would have dealt with it worse. But I became very angry, and more importantly, was a lack of self worth. I didn't feel like I had any value to myself. I felt like I had no future. And when you have a person who feels that their life has no value and they can't see a future, uh, it's understandable, I guess, at least from my perspective, that they might get into some troublesome behavior. So yeah, when I was 14, I caught my first felony, and then when I was 15, I got locked up twice. When I was 16, I got locked up twice, um, and it took me many years to understand this that where that anger was really coming from was a misplaced situation that was really about a lack of self worth and just not knowing how I'm going to fit into society. And like I said, I don't claim I dealt with it very well, but in the early days, it was a lot of street life. I was on the streets all the time, hustling and selling drugs and all that kind of stuff. And I guess in another way, to get back to what we're talking about, there's an adventure in that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Now it's an unhealthy adventure, but it was nevertheless gave me a sense of adventure. And then eventually, when I broke away from that, I still needed that sense of adventure, but I needed it to be healthy. and that's where sailing came in. It allowed me to have that input, to have that way of bringing that excitement into my life, but without breaking the law.
Got it, got it. So yeah, you hit on a very important point there. Quite a few. There are a lot of young people, as you know, today that are struggling with uh, going in the right direction. So uh, I think I heard you say that if they can find something to focus in on that channels that energy from negative to positive and getting into something constructive that they might be interested in, it might lead them in a better direction.
Yeah, it's hard too because it's hard to convince somebody to take a different path, especially when they're a teenager.
Yeah.
Because teenagers, as we've all been one,
Yeah.
we're quite difficult at that time in our life, and we don't really want to have other people tell us what to do,
Right.
right? We don't. We want to, and it's almost like how can you take that individual and show them a better path, but make them think that they found the path themselves,
Right.
And so yeah, it was a difficult situation, I guess, in those regards,
No, I can imagine. I can imagine. And, young folk today, young folk the world over, throughout the ages, if they could just understand that one piece that, a couple of years in your teens can define the rest of your life
Mm.
for better or for worse. So you started to come out of that though. What initially drew you to that positive outlet that turned out to be sailing?
Well, what got me the sort of a moment of clarity was the fifth time I was locked up. The fourth time I was locked up, I was in a cell with this kid Smith. There were three-man cells in that particular, that detention center. And so we do our time the fourth time, right? Me and Smith. There's another kid because there's three beds. And other people kind of rotate in and out. It was cell 46. All right, cell 46. I'm in the bed. He's in a bed. They're all numbered and whatnot. We do our time. We get out. Like 3 months later, I get locked up again. And within 48 hours, who comes in the door? Smith.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, we're in the same cell, in the same beds. And it's like, we just did this, dude. We just did this. Like, and it kind of, it was deja vu, and it made me think, look, man, if you spend your life like this, you're going to be in and out of prison your whole life. Like, there is no future to this life. And so that was kind of the first step in the process of making me recognize that it was a road to nowhere.
Right. Okay.
But as far as sailing comes in, when I was about 19, I was looking at an atlas, and I love to travel. I love it's not just the fact of traveling; it's seeing different cultures, different languages, different food, just different music. Just that whole thing, and immersing yourself in different cultures. I knew I wanted to see the world. The best way that I can understand my own culture is by seeing other cultures. And so I was looking at an atlas, and I just, it's obvious. 80%, roughly 80% of the countries on Earth connect to the ocean. So if I could get good at sailing, well, I could travel to all over the world. And dropping an anchor is free. You got your own kitchen. You don't got to go out to
Right.
eat every night. You got your bed. You don't got to get hotels every night. I thought what I didn't realize is how much a sailboat costs. Right?
Okay.
I'm taking all this cheap stuff, and sailboats aren't cheap. Well, it just depends too on what you're willing to deal with, But it really came out of a part of it was that inner adventurous spirit and trying to find an outlet for that adventurous spirit that was healthy. And part of it was my desire to see the world and experience other cultures. And I just thought that sailing is this great. The ocean is the ultimate wilderness, and I love the wilderness. I love hiking up mountains. I don't do enough of it anymore, but I love doing that. And so it was a blend of adventure and experiential education to understand myself and my culture and how we fit into this world.
Got it. Okay. So I know, just reminiscing for a bit, when I got married, my wife says, "Hey, where we going for honeymoon?" I said, "The Poconos." Everybody says the Poconos. So Poconos. She says, "No, we're not going to do that. We're going to go on a cruise." First cruise I'd ever been on was when I was in my early 30s. First time I've ever been on the open water was on a cruise ship. Instantly fell in love with the solitude out there on the water, no one around that you can see for horizon to horizon. Fell in love with it instantly. But enough about me. All right, so you got that atlas, you got it
Right.
into your mind that you wanted to get out there. How did you start making this happen? Because I know the first time you went out was just like, I'm just doing it, and you just got out there. So how did you transition from the atlas to now you get ready to get out there and actually do some sailing?
Yeah, so I made three goals at that moment when I was sitting there looking at, at that same time. The first goal was to ride a bicycle through Southeast Asia. The second goal was to cross an ocean, and the third goal was to start a nonprofit.
Okay.
And I decided a lot of my life is goal orientated. It helps me stay balanced. It helps me stay on a path. If I have a goal I can focus on, then that keeps me out of trouble, basically. So with the first goal, biking through Southeast Asia in 2002, and you might want to wonder why. Like, why would anybody ride a bicycle? I got a scholarship when I was 18 to build a library in Thailand.
Wow.
I never thought I would get the scholarship. Like, a lot of people applied. It was a
Mhm.
one-page paper. I don't know how I got it, but I got it. And so I went to Thailand. I built this library, and I wanted to go. I wanted to be on good behavior. And it's not going back to Southeast Asia on a bike is bad behavior. It's just you're kind of in a bubble
Okay.
because you're in a program. You're trying to represent that program, and you're trying to do to be on do it the best you can. So I knew I wanted to come back, and so I got a Schwinn bicycle, a piece of junk Schwinn bicycle. And I didn't mean to do it alone. I just didn't know anybody who wanted to. I mean, my friends growing up were a bunch of street people, and they still were friends of mine but they didn't even know where Thailand was.
Got you.
They never heard of Vietnam outside the Vietnam War. So in 2002, I rode a bicycle, but I spent about 100 days alone going through mostly Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And Thailand, a little bit of Thailand. Thailand felt like Canada,
Wow.
after Laos, Vietnam, because
Okay.
the roads are paved. There's no land. In Cambodia, you got landmines everywhere. They had 10 million landmines at the
Wow.
time. So, but that gives that adventure. Like I said, it's
Mhm.
that heightened sense of adventure. And the second was to sail across an ocean. I bought a boat in 2004, a little piece of junk, 25 footer, a 1969 Coronado. It was a total piece of junk. And I took it down to the Florida Keys. I made every mistake you could make, ripped sails, ran aground, ripped my tiller in half. I got hit by hurricanes, got hit by lightning. I can't claim hit by lightning is my fault, but I got hit by lightning. Maybe that was bad luck. But and then it evolved into, like I said, the second goal ultimately was to cross the Atlantic, either as a captain or alone. Well, like that van life thing is very popular, has been for maybe 5, 6 years,
Yeah.
10 years. That whole well, you already know how to drive a car, so it doesn't take much to get in a van and drive across country. I don't know how to sail a boat. It's like a whole new thing I had to learn on top of that goal. So I just dove head first into that. And 2008, I got the boat 2004, my first boat. By 2008, I sailed alone across the Atlantic the first time. I sailed Europe and then West Africa, about a year in Europe, but I had to leave the boat over there and come back and work. I didn't have enough money.
Okay.
And then I spent about 6 months in West Africa, which is really the highlight of the whole trip. Mostly Senegal, Gambia, Morocco. But I love kora music. I don't know if you know kora music.
I'm not familiar with it.
The kora is a West African instrument. It kind of looks, it's like built out of a giant gourd. It's got 23 strings. It's kind of the size of a small cello.
Okay.
And it's something about this music I love. So I was going there. I had to my father went to West Africa in the 70s to learn to play this instrument. So that's how I knew about it. So I was on a mission. I'm going to find someone to build a kora for my father that I can give it to him, So I found the Jabates. The Jabates are the family. It's a passed down generation to generation to generation. And these are the kora masters. So it was this whole mission, and it was a great time. Sailed back to the Caribbean, came back to Annapolis. I wanted to go through a Northwest Passage. It really, that trip around the Americas, we're going to get into in here in a second, came from that desire to take it to the next level.
Got it.
You sailing across the Atlantic twice by yourself, the first time I sailed over Europe, the second time I sailed back from Africa. Yeah, I mean it's a quite a feat, but I knew I could push it further. I knew I had the skills and the mentality to take it to the next level. So that's where the trip around the Americas came.
All right, so I want to focus on something that I hope people got a flavor for is the fact that you didn't get paralyzed by analysis of this whole endeavor you wanted to pursue. You didn't sit there and do some long drawn out thought process. You took action, and in all aspects of our life. Okay, taking action is is what separates people who never fulfill their goals and dreams from those who do. So I want to just focus on the fact that Matt took some serious action, and then beyond that, you hit a lot of snags. You talked about the lightning running aground, all that stuff. But I bet you, and you can confirm this for me, or tell me I'm wrong, you came out of each of those with a hell of a lot of education about the process.
Yeah, and it's like you're saying, reward lives in a house of risk. We have to take risks to find that, and if you aren't willing to take risks, it's going to be hard for you to find those rewards. You want to take educate whether it's financial, investing into a stock in the stock market or business or whatever. There's a big risk involved in that. You want to take
Yeah.
educated risks as much as you can. You want to, I wanted to sail across the Atlantic a couple of times before I did that big, spending 309 days alone in the ocean, go around the Americas. But we have to take risks, or else you're just not going to accomplish anything
Right.
in life. And it's hard, man. It is hard. It is hard to let go because a big part of your brain is like, what are you doing, man? Why are you investing all that money in that particular whatever that endeavor, that business, that stock, whatever it is? Well, you have to. I mean, and all you can do is your best too, man, because you just don't know how your investments are going to pan out. We can't read the future. We can't. If we
Right.
could see the future, we'd all win the lottery, right? Every one of us win the lottery the next time it was drawn.
Exactly.
So yeah, so we just have to do the best we can, and you educate yourself as much as possible in the
Sure.
process before you take that risk.
Right.
But I'm a firm believer that reward lives in the house of risk, and we have to take risks in life, whether it's personal, financial, or anything else, or else you're just not going to have accomplishment.
Right. And you didn't jump out there and just say, I'm going to sail all the way around the world for your first try. You did this trip to the Keys, right? And
Right.
then it snowballed from there in terms of the experience and whatnot. So there you are. You've got this stuff under your belt. You've done the Atlantic crossings a couple of times. And now talk to us about the lead up to the big expedition, how you arrived at the decision that you were going to do that.
So when I was sailing through on that trip, that Europe, Africa, Caribbean trip alone, the Northwest Passage is the Canadian Arctic. It's all these islands, and they're trapped in ice, and there's polar bears that will eat you, and it's a place in explorer folklore, And I'm a big fan of the explorers,
Yeah.
Shackleton and Amundsen and Scott and all these guys, and so it's kind of like if you're sailing and you want to go to like the furthest level, it's kind of like a guy who likes mountain climbing and decides to do K2.
Okay.
K2 is the most dangerous. This was like the K2 of sailing. More people have died trying to get through the Northwest Passage than any other place in the world, and more explorers have, including Antarctica. And part of that is the English, though. The English wanted to be the first through the Northwest Passage. Initially, they was about the trade route because it was all about money in those days. The spices were worth more money than gold, and it was all about how can we get to the Spice Islands. So the English, they were pushing through initially trying to get better trade routes. They realized this is a really bad way to get to the Spice Islands. So it became a matter of national pride to planting the flag on top
Right.
of Mount Everest.
Right.
We're going to plant the flag, and unfortunately the English did it in a real arrogant kind of way, where they would send big ships with hundreds of guys. Like Franklin lost 126 guys on one expedition. None of them, they all disappeared. So the first guy who got through was Amundsen in Norwegian. He had 5 guys. He was living like the Inuit. See, the English looked at the Inuit as another word for Eskimo. And it's the proper word for Eskimo. That's what they're called. They're not called Eskimo. They're called Inuit. Anyways, the English looked at the Inuit like they were a bunch of barbarians. Like, we got nothing to learn from these people. They're primitive.
Mm-hmm.
Amundsen looked at them like, these guys have been living up here for 6,000 years. Maybe I can learn from them. And that's really what the mentality that changes. So anyways, I'm reading this, right? I'm reading this. I'm getting excited about this. I love the adventure. I love the challenge. And so originally that trip around the Americas, I come back from Africa, sail over to the Caribbean. I have $28 when I get to the Caribbean. I have nothing. You can barely buy a hamburger. So I went to the U.S. Virgin Islands where I could work without a visa, because getting a visa is always hard working international.
Sure.
And so I'm working in a boatyard, working hard, making bad money, whatever. And I see this advertisement back in Annapolis for this little organization called CRAB. CRAB is Chesapeake Regional Accessible Boating. It's a small nonprofit. It helps people with physical disabilities go sailing. So I think, you know what, when I get back to Annapolis, when I sail my boat back, I'm just going to do volunteer work for this organization until I run out of money. And then I'll go back to working. I worked as a sail maker. I worked rigging boats. I worked doing electronic, installing electronics.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in a lot of different parts of the marine industry, not as a career, just to learn. I worked as a sail maker, not because I want to spend my life as a sail maker, but if you're a sailor, you might want to know how to build a sail and fix a sail in the ocean. It all is education, tools. So anyways, I get back to Annapolis. I'm doing volunteer work for this organization. One day I'm sitting there, I'm painting the bottom of this boat because nobody wants to paint it. It's a nasty job. So I'm doing it, and the main guy, the guy who started it all, he's in a wheelchair. He was in an accident. He's quadriplegic, and I say to him, hey man, his name was Don Backey. I say, hey Don, man, why don't you let me take one of these boats up to the Arctic? We're gonna try to raise some money for the organization. And he kind of looked at me, and I thought he might laugh, because it's such a crazy thing to say. And he looked at me and he's like, all right, let's do this.
Wow.
So that's where it started. And then we got a slightly better boat, this 27-foot Alban Vega, a 1971 27-foot Alban Vega. It's not a big boat. I mean, I can't stand up in it without hitting my head. But, it was like, all right, we got a little bit of a better boat here. Well, hey, I like to get this boat back to Annapolis. Why don't I, go around the Americas? And then I start looking into it more and more, just researching it. And I realized nobody's ever done it before. So I'm like, well, hey, why don't I try to be the first person to sail nonstop? And nonstop means nonstop. You don't drop an anchor. You don't tie off to anything. You literally sail when you're sleeping. Some people think they got a problem if they walk in their sleep. Imagine sailing in your sleep. That's a real problem. So yeah, man, it really grew from that initial idea of, I just wanted to go through that K2 of sailing, that Northwest Passage. And from there, it grew into this idea of this trip around the Americas. Then it was like a nonstop trip, and I'm single-handed. I'm alone. So it's a nonstop, single-handed circumnavigation. And nobody, like I said, nobody had done it before. And so it's like, well, hey, let me see if I can pull this off. So I got a year's worth of freeze-dried food, because you got to eat, right?
Right.
So I got a year's worth of freeze-dried food. They make these packages of food for like the zombie apocalypse or something. You put it in your basement in case the world ends, and now you got all this food. So I found a company that did that, and I called them up, and I'm like, well, hey, has anybody actually lived off of your food? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, I'll be your guinea pig. I'll live off your food, and then you can tell everybody on your website that, yeah, you can actually do it, And so that's how I got the food. Then I had a manual water maker. I had to pump this thing to turn salt water into fresh water. So every day I would pump it about 1,500 times to make about a gallon of water, a little less than a gallon. I lived off of a little less than a gallon of water a day. And I added it all up over the trip. I pumped the thing 406,000 times in order to just live, just to get the water. But yeah, that was sort of the evolution of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if I'd make it. I didn't know if I thought if I could get through the Northwest Passage, sailing above Canada and above Alaska, because when you pop out, you also have to sail the entire north coast of Alaska. You come out, you're like, you see the deadliest catch. I'm
Right.
like a I'm like 1,000 miles north of the deadliest catch. I'm like way above those guys. So it's intimidating. I mean,
Sure.
anybody with any sanity is looking at a map and understand, man, you're gonna do what? But you got to have that dedication too, that dedication to a goal. You understand the risks. You're taking those risks. You're willing to take those risks. I understood when I left the dock, I probably had a 50-50 chance that I'll never get back to land again. I had to accept that. And if you properly accept it, in this
Yeah.
case, I know it sounds like over the top, but accepting death. When I accepted that, I could be in a storm without proper fear. I'm not saying I didn't have hesitation. Every sane person in a storm is going to be like, oh my, I hope it doesn't get worse. I hope it doesn't kill me. But I was prepared for it mentally. I was never going to quit.
You,
Nothing could stop me.
this is one thing I always say, and I had an incident years ago when I was a child, actually, and I always tell people at the point where you become comfortable with the reality of your mortality, then you can really accomplish some things. Not that you have a death wish or anything like that. It's just that you've accepted the grand scheme of things, your place in it, and you just get comfortable. So is that kind of how you saw it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and it's not an easy thing. Like you're saying, and we all have to face our own mortalities in different ways, and but what's worse? What's worse?
Right.
Living to being 80 years old, 90 years old, you're on your deathbed, and you're looking back and you're wishing that
Right.
you took those risks. You're wishing you lived that different life, or I hate to say it, but living that life and maybe dying doing it.
Right.
At least it's not a tragedy if you die doing what you love.
I agree with
You
that.
know, yeah. So it's and it. I mean, I want to live to be 100.
So do I.
I want to. Yeah, exactly. We all do, right? Any sane person wants
Yep.
to live to be. But at the same time, you got to take those risks and you got to grasp onto those goals because as humans, as people, we're so capable.
Right.
Our capabilities are, I mean, there's so many stories you can read that I can read that everybody can read. It's just whether it's business, exploration, doesn't matter. It's unbelievable what we're capable as individuals, as our species. So, but we're not going to do anything if we let doubt get in our head and mess
Right.
with us. You know what I'm saying?
No
We
doubt.
gotta get beyond that. And yeah, mortality is probably one of the biggest things because we're all scared to die. I mean, at the end of the day, and maybe we shouldn't be. I don't know because it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we gotta go after our goals. We gotta have the confidence and the openness, I guess. The acceptance that that it's possible that you might fail, just like an investment. It's possible you might put all that money in that business and that stock and it might fail, but you have to be okay with the fact that at least I tried. At least
Exactly.
I did what I could.
Exactly. And so you're employing a ton of resourcefulness out there. You got the water maker. You've learned to do repairs. You're alone, and people need to really understand you. There is no cavalry coming if you get into trouble, and you're sailing through some of the most treacherous waters on earth. I mean, you're going up the North Atlantic, you're in the Arctic, coming down by Alaska, the Pacific, going around that tip of South America, which all that water gets funneled in there, all those weather systems. Talk to us about the voyage, what you saw, some of
Sure,
the things
sure.
that, made you think, you know what, I might not make it out of this.
So what the voyage was, to take a little step back and describe it. So you
Okay.
leave out of the Chesapeake Bay, leave out the East Coast. You sail north till you get between Canada and Greenland, and you keep sailing north, and then you turn left, and you go through the Northwest Passage, which is this Arctic archipelago
Mhm.
full of ice and everything. You pop out above Alaska, you sail around the entire state of Alaska, you sail down the Pacific Ocean, around the bottom of South America, which is Cape Horn. I think it's technically Argentina at that point. But anyways, sail around Cape Horn, and then you go back up the Atlantic to the Chesapeake Bay. So that is the route. And like I said, it's nonstop. I was alone in the ocean for 309 days. I sailed 27,077 nautical miles, which is about 35,000 highway miles. Because, nautical miles and highway miles are different. But for people to think in miles, it's about 35,000 miles on your car down the road without stopping. So when you first leave out, I had the boat so heavily overladen because I got all this food.
Sure.
I had 700. It was a 5,000-pound little boat, and I got like 2,500 pounds of gear. Then the boat's creaking and making noise, and you're trying to sail it easy. You're trying to take it easy on the boat. You're overladen with supplies. And as you get up between Canada and Greenland, well, there's some storms right around there. Let me tell you. So you deal with the storms you best you can. There was one good one in particular. I just had to do the best. I made it through. A boat north of me got really, really badly damaged, about 30 miles north of me. But whatever, you just keep moving on. Now you get up into the Arctic. Now, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Maine, New England, you hear about fog.
Right.
Foggy fog and what. The fog in the Arctic is unbelievable. It is so thick, you can't see 100 feet in front of you. And it's also wet. It's an extremely moist fog, so everything is wet. Your boat is wet, you're wet. It gets inside the boat. So the top of your boat is dripping like a cave. Your sleeping bag is wet. Your pillow is wet. The whole boat, all your clothing is wet. Everything is just soaked, basically. And there's no way. I didn't have a heater on the boat. I didn't have a radar. I just couldn't afford it. And I tried. I couldn't get sponsorship. So what are you going to do? Maybe that's a business scenario too. I mean, sometimes people aren't going to back you. You got a good idea. At least you got an idea you think is a good idea. You pitch this idea to other people. Maybe they don't support it. Well, so maybe you don't get the financing you wish you had or wanted to have. You got two options. Either you do it or you don't do it. So I said, well, I'm just going to do it, man. I know, I got the small boat. I have very little funding. I don't have all this equipment like a radar, a heater, and so on. But, the hell with it. I got determination. And if I got determination, that's what matters. At the end of the day, determination and perseverance is all that really matters at the end of the day. So if you have that, and I felt like, okay, so anyways, you get up in the fog, man. You can't see the icebergs. They're hiding in the fog. And they just come out of the fog, sometimes right in front of you. And you're sitting there, you're standing in the cockpit with a tiller. I had a tiller, I didn't have a wheel. So you're just standing there, and an iceberg pops out right in front of you. You go left or right real quick to dodge it. Now, if there's big waves, the waves will hit the icebergs, and it sounds like thunder. So in the fog, you hear like thunder over there. So you're like, I need to sail over here, But you don't always have it. And the problem with the big icebergs, they look dangerous, but they're kind of safe. You can see them a little ways out.
Okay.
They're deep in the water. They're a threat. But you know what? The little pieces of ice falls off the big icebergs. They're like the size of a garage or a bus or an SUV, and they hide right under the water with only a little bit sticking up. That's the most dangerous. And you're trying to dodge these little pieces of ice. They're not little. I mean, they're the size of a garage or a house or an SUV or a bus. And that's what's going to sink you if you're not careful. Right. So it's sleep deprivation. That's the problem up there, is you just can't get any sleep. And how do you deal with sleep deprivation? So what I did to deal with sleep deprivation is I realized my brain is only moving at half speed. So I should move my body at half speed. So everything I did slow and under control, and I just try to stay on. I try not to move too fast, try not to do anything, try not to get too excited, just try to stay cool and calm, under control. Because, I was hearing things in the fog. I hear people talking. Because, maybe you don't sleep for 2 days. Maybe you don't sleep for
You start to hallucinate.
Yeah, you start to lose your. There's a fun side to it. I was up there singing Christmas carols. Santa Claus lives up there. So I was up there having a good time with it too, and I was putting some Wu-Tang verses down. I grew up listening to Wu-Tang and Pantera.
Wu-Tang forever, man.
Yeah, Wu-Tang forever. So I'm up there just having fun with it, trying to have fun with it. Because this is another thing, and this is, I guess, a lesson in life that I learned from it. I'm wet, I'm cold, I'm hungry. I have every reason in the world to be miserable. But guess what? Being miserable was not going to give me a hot shower and a piece of pizza.
That's right.
Or a cold beer. Yeah. So it's all about attitude. So I decided to have a good. I felt like a kid in Disneyland because I'm up there with the explorers. This is where the great explorers. I'm
Yeah.
following in the footsteps of the explorers. So I just decided to have this good attitude, come at it from that angle. So you're just having fun with it, even though it was a difficult situation. You just try to have fun with it the best you can, and generally speaking, it was a good time. It was hard. I mean, it was cold, it was wet. You had icebergs all over the place. But ultimately, I did really make the best of the situation.
So, was there ever a time where it was going through your mind like, okay, icebergs all around, I've got fog, I'm sleep deprived. What's going through your mind? Are you thinking, wow, I'm really committed here. I'm really committed. If something goes wrong right now, you know, what happens? What did that kind of stuff ever cross your mind?
Yeah, it's always on the back of your mind that
Mhm.
if the boat goes down, you ain't gonna make it. I mean, the water up there is so cold, you're not gonna last more than a few minutes in it. They're saying you're alone up there, so there's nobody's gonna get to you.
Right.
I mean, it's and you had that. I had that, like I was saying before, when I left the dock, you had to accept death. Like you had to have that commitment before you leave the dock. So by
Right.
the time I got up there, it was already like a past tense. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't. I had to accept it before I even left.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
yes, this is the reality of the environment that you are putting yourself into, and therefore, as a mean of acceptance, you just have to accept the fact that yeah, man, if you go down, you go down.
Right.
And like I said, it's not tragedy if you die doing what you love. So it gets into that kind of mindset where it's a lot of acceptance
Yeah.
is really what it comes down to.
Acceptance, and I would imagine just total commitment to your goal.
Yeah, I wasn't going to quit unless the boat sunk. If I broke both my arms or both my legs, I wouldn't be able to continue on. But
There was a
no, there
point where
was
you thought
no.
you had a broken rib, right? It was
I did, yeah. I
okay.
broke a rib down by Cape Horn because I got tossed. And Cape Horn is the other one, right? In Alaska, the
Mm.
Bering Sea. I put the boat upside down in the Bering Sea. That's another place that was rough. Bering Sea has a bad reputation for a good reason, and that's another foggy, nasty. But and I didn't do the entire Bering Sea north to south because I came out of the Northwest Passage. I was above the Bering Sea, so I had to go through all. By the time I got to the Bering Sea, I thought I was going south. I was like, hey, I'm like southerly or something
Mhm.
here. And so yeah, the Bering Sea was also nasty. Yeah, and then you get through the Bering Sea and things start to warm up as you go south. You get to 50, you get to 40, you get to 30, and things start warming up. Things start getting a little drier. You actually take your shoes off, and you try to dry your feet out because you've been wearing socks all that time. I didn't have a lot of layers. You're doing your best and get a little sun, which is nice when you've been in that clouds. And I'm a ginger man. I burn
Ah,
quick, but it's nice to have it when you've been in the clouds. You get down to the northeast, or sorry, the easterly trade winds down by the equator in the Pacific. It's a massive band of wind, maybe 2,500 miles north to south. I had to beat into it, going directly into the wind and waves, and you're pounding. You're coming off waves, bam, 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 all day, every day. I popped a leak
okay.
below the water line. My boat started leaking, and my bilge pumps both broke. My automatic bilge pump and my manual bilge pump both broke. So I had to take an empty can of corn and bail my boat out with it for the last 16,000 miles. I ain't even got to Cape Horn yet, and I'm sinking. But that's determination.
Yep.
I mean, look, if I thought, well, like I said, I wasn't going to quit unless the boat sunk. It was 110% determination. There was nothing else. The only way for me to get home is to go forward. If I go forward long enough, I complete that circle. I'm back. It's over.
Right.
But
Right.
there is no giving up. I wouldn't allow
Right.
myself to give up. I'd rather die before I quit. And that's that acceptance in the beginning is you make that commitment to yourself, to your goal, where it's 110%. You don't even think about it. I never thought once about giving up because to me, giving up was the worst thought I could ever have in my head. It's all or nothing, really. So, anyways, you go through all of that, and it's hot, man. Down by the equator, it was so hot in that boat, and it was just nasty, nasty conditions. And I'm getting like heat rashes on my body, on my butt. I'm sitting. My boat had like 5'6" headroom. I'm 5'11". I couldn't stand up in my boat, so you're sitting all the time. You got a heat rash on your butt, and you're sitting on the heat rash. It turns to like boils. Like it was just messed up, man. And then eventually you get through that. and now you're in the Southern Ocean. It starts getting colder as you go to Cape Horn. Cape Horn is about 57 and a half south. So here in Annapolis, Maryland, let's say in Washington, D.C. or Baltimore, we're about 39 north. So that's 57 south. You're 600 miles from Antarctica. When you go around Cape Horn, Antarctica, you can almost throw a rock. I mean, 600 miles seems like a long way, but in the ocean, it's not. You can almost throw a rock and hit Antarctica, So approaching Cape Horn, like you said, is one of the deadliest bodies of water on planet Earth. It is by far Cape of Good Hope, the bottom of South Africa.
Right.
That's about 33 south. So think of it, 33 south versus 57 south. You're talking 1,200 miles further south.
Right.
So there's a big difference between the two.
Sure.
Cape of Good Hope, South African Cape, they have big problems. They have strong currents. And so with the currents and the wind, it can create really bad waves. Well, of course, you got that in Cape Horn too. So yeah, I had a lot of storms leading up to that rib. Like you said, I broke the rib. It was a pitch black night because there was a heavy cloud. When you have heavy clouds, you can't see the moon. If there's no moon, it's just dark, like pitch black. You can't see 6 inches off the side of your boat. You're sailing full speed in pitch black darkness, just going for it, And I was climbing up. I was in the cockpit. I was stepping up, and a wave hit. I didn't see it coming, and it threw me across the cockpit, and a piece of wood got up underneath my ribs. Luckily, the wood broke, because if it didn't break, it could have penetrated, could have hurt me, impaled me or something.
Okay.
So luckily, I took the wood with me, but it still cracked some ribs. And what are you gonna do, man? Even on land, what can you do about broken ribs?
Right. Nothing. Pretty much.
Nothing.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
nothing. So it's the same thing. You wrap it up a little bit with something. I had an ace bandage or something, but whatever, man. It's the goal. This ain't gonna stop me. Broken little bit of broken ribs. That can't stop me. Nothing can stop me. That's that mentality. Nothing can stop me. So whatever. I just lived with it. I made it around Cape Horn, and I was pretty fortunate. The day I went around the Horn, it was only blowing about 35 miles an hour, which for down there is pretty good.
Okay.
And it was behind me, so I was, when it's behind you, it's a lot more comfortable. The
Right.
waves are pushing you as opposed to beating into it. They're behind you. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was a beautiful day. Every sailor, dreams about sailing around Cape Horn.
True.
It's always, if the Northwest Passage is K2, then Cape Horn is Mount Everest.
Absolutely.
They're very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, man, it was a beautiful day.
So all right, you're coming back into Annapolis, having biked Southeast Asia alone. You are coming in from this circumnavigation of the Americas. You got this one more goal that you had talked about, which was the nonprofit, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So this is a totally different arena, okay, from the things that you had previously done, which were huge accomplishments. So with the nonprofit, tell us about it. What is the focus of it? Where is it? How can people learn more about it?
Yeah, I don't know if I really truly appreciated the difference, like you're saying, and you're making a really good point, because if you think about the first couple of goals, biking through Southeast Asia, sailing alone across the Atlantic, doing the trip around the Americas, all that was a very endurance-based situation. It was not bureaucratic. It's not, getting sponsorship can be, you got to write emails, you got to try to create PowerPoints, there is a bureaucratic aspect to sponsorship, but generally speaking, it's highly adventure-based. Running a nonprofit, it's actually highly bureaucratic. So that it is very much a different world. But anyways, what the general concept, I created a nonprofit right when I got back called Ocean Research Project. You can check it out, oceanresearchproject.org. The website.
We'll link to that. Yep.
Generally speaking, this is what's up, is that the cost right now, if you want to do research, just generally speaking, scientific data collection, ocean research, the average cost is $25,000 a day.
Wow.
These are large power boats. they burn a lot of fuel. They got a lot of crew. They're big boats. It takes a lot of money. In the Arctic, it's $40,000 to $50,000 a day. So the technologies necessary to do ocean research, just like a computer used to take up a whole room.
Right.
Now we got a phone in our pocket more powerful than that whole room. Technologies to do research have gotten smaller and less power hungry, which means we can do research on a sailboat today we could have never have done, 20 years ago. And you can imagine 20 years from now, it's only going to get better. And this is the kicker when you talk about finance, because let's just say money makes the world go round. I can do the same research at 10% of the cost. I'm 3,000 a day. It's less than 10%. In the Arctic, they're 40 to 50,000 a day. I'm 3,000 a day. On a 65-foot, actually 72 feet technically, sailboat, because those technologies are just more, they're smaller, they're less power hungry, they're more accessible than they used to be. So I realized this, and I wanted to. It's disruptive too. I'm kind of trying to disrupt the way that the traditional research is being conducted in the ocean. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not claiming I am. I work with scientists. We have scientists part of the organization. There's scientists who are part of this. But the long and short was the understanding that we can do this in a much cheaper manner and really more environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, we burn a fraction of the fossil fuels. The amount of diesel I can sail to the Arctic. It doesn't. I don't have to burn them. If you're motoring a 300-foot research vessel, you're burning massive amounts of fuel. Yeah. So we the first couple of years we focused on plastic trash in the ocean, and then since then we've been up in the Arctic. So 2013, 14 were really long open ocean trips. Like I spent 70 days in the Atlantic nonstop. 2013. 2014, I sailed from San Francisco to Yokohama, Japan, nonstop on a 29-footer. It's a long story, but you don't need a big boat. Basically, this was it, man. It makes sense of this because I don't want to get too jumbled. When I was sailing around the Americas, spending that 309 days alone in the ocean, eating that freeze-dried food, you get tired. You want to eat some fresh fish.
Sure.
So I'm dragging 2 lines. I always had 2 lures off the back of my boat. Different depths, different, lengths, different types. And this is the situation. So let's say it's 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. You're getting kind of hungry. Every time you make a meal, you got to pump the water maker. You might have to pump it for 45 minutes to make enough water.
That's energy expenditure right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and you sit there, and it just sucks. It just sucks. It's like, man, I got to pump this water maker, and that because you need water to rehydrate the dehydrated food,
right. Okay.
And you need to drink water for yourself. Okay, so you're thinking all this, and you hear your reel on your fishing rod start going. It starts going out, and now you're excited. You're like, oh man, all right, I'm gonna fresh fish tonight. You go out there, you grab the reel. It's heavy. You start reeling it in. It's not fighting too much, but it's still heavy. And you're wondering, okay, why is it not fighting? Why? And then you get it to the boat, and it's a piece of plastic trash.
Okay.
It's a plastic bag. It's something like that. I caught 10 pieces of plastic trash for every fish I caught.
Wow.
It happened all the time. So it was something that got aggravating. It just like you see the trash out there all the time in the ocean, and it just kind of pisses you off after a while. We're trashing the oceans. At the time, 2013, the eastern side, there's a garbage patch in the Pacific that's the famous one.
Right.
There's also one in the Atlantic that is pretty big. I mean, it's not as big, but it's because of Europe and the United States, it's nearly as big, but it's not as well researched. So nobody had mapped out the eastern half of that garbage patch. It was unknown at the time how much trash is out there. So the first year of the organization, Ocean Research Project, we focused on mapping out that eastern side, which is over by the Azores. We were closer to Africa than we were to the United States for a lot of that mapping, But at the time, I spent so much time in the ocean. Who cares? The whole Atlantic was like my backyard at that point. So we did that. And then next year, I wanted to understand, you have the Pacific garbage patch. You have these easterly currents that go underneath of it, easterly winds and currents, the trade winds. How much of the plastic in those garbage patches is being dispersed by those easterly winds and easterly currents. Nobody had ever looked into it before. So we were trying to understand how the currents are moving plastic from the garbage patch to other regions of the ocean through like this conveyor belt, which is the easterly trades and currents, which go by Hawaii, for instance. They go to the Marshall Islands. That's where that stretches. That's the same easterlies I was telling you earlier I had to beat into that caused the leak in my boat. You know, it's the same, except this time I was going east to west instead of north to south. So one benefit of doing this type of research, I always wanted to go to the Arctic and I always wanted to do climate research, but it's a lot cheaper to do plastics research because you need a trawl to collect it. And we were like a small, I don't have any money. I don't come from any money. I don't have any connections to bring money. We needed something that would be meaningful, something that meant something to me because I saw all the plastic trash out there on all my other journeys. And so this seemed like, okay, you're a fledgling nonprofit. You got to do a research that you can afford, basically. And so that's what we did the first couple of years. And after that, 2015 and on, we've been going up to the Arctic, Greenland, the Northwest Passage, doing a variety. We're mapping the seafloor for NASA. So we mapped about 2,500 miles. A lot of it's uncharted up there.
Right.
So we do seafloor mapping as a way to fund the other research.
Okay.
Because it's easier to fund seafloor mapping because there's initiatives to map these last uncharted regions.
Right. I think the moon is better researched than the floor of the oceans of the earth.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Which gets back to the plastic trash issue, right? We have this plastic trash floating on the surface. We can get an idea of that like I did. Go in there, you drop the trawls, you collect the plastic, you count the plastic, you figure out how much per square kilometer. We don't use per square mile because it's the world all uses, except for us.
Right.
So how much per square? What we don't know is how much of that plastic trash is going down to the bottom of the ocean. Because like you just said, we don't know anything about the bottom of the ocean. We know more about the surface of the moon than the bottom of the ocean. They could be covered in plastic trash. So they have determined within the last 6 or 7 years that only 10 or 20% of the plastic trash is actually on the surface. And the rest of it's either in the water columns, because there's a lot of water columns. And, the ocean's like 16,000 feet deep on average. And then the rest must be on the bottom.
Wow.
But we just don't know. I made a test, man. I took some salt water and I took some samples that we collected. And I let it sit for a long time, for several years. And I watched some of those pieces of plastic did float to the bottom eventually. So eventually plastic loses buoyancy, and eventually it does get kicked off on beaches too.
Right.
There's a lot of beaches that get the plastic trash. It's all,
and
we just don't know.
And this is a very important issue because, when you talk about environmentalism, the oceans are where we work. The oceans are where we get a lot of food from. The oceans are responsible for, climate patterns on the planet. So it's definitely an environment that, it's kind of been out of sight, out of mind, literally, because you can't see, the floor of it. But how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more? Because I think part of the problem is going back to out of sight, out of mind. Humans, this is where we live on land. Very few humans operate recreationally or occupationally on the water. So how can people learn more about what you're doing?
Well, you can definitely check out the website, and we're going to start we made some YouTube videos in the past. We're up in the Arctic dodging icebergs and lowering probes. And we need to do more of that because it's, as you know, it's a very powerful form of communication. And to get, like you're saying, with the power of the ocean. So there's two types of plankton. There's zooplankton and phytoplankton. Zooplankton are the little shrimps, they look like little tiny shrimps. Phytoplankton is a plant-based plankton. Phytoplankton creates roughly 50% of all of our oxygen. So we think about trees creating oxygen, turning CO2 into oxygen. The phytoplankton does it just as much, if not more, than the trees. If we trash the ocean bad enough and we kill off the plankton, we're not going to have oxygen. It is, and all life came from the ocean at some level or another too. So yeah, it's absolutely vital. And from there, we've been doing, like I say, mostly looking at glaciers, mapping the seafloor and looking at the health of the glaciers. And we've been moving it. This next expedition next year, We want to look at that correlation. See, glaciers have like a healthy glacier has like a river underneath the ice, and it has a nutrient plume, a sediment plume, and in that sediment plume, because it's grinding the earth as it, it's like taffy.
I
Glaciers
got
are
you.
this slow
Mhm.
moving, and as it grinds the earth, it creates these sediment plumes that have nutrients. Well, the plankton needs these nutrients to have the big plankton blooms. So if too many glaciers become land fast, which means they're just stuck on land, they don't have an ice shelf anymore, they're not going to get the nutrients.
Okay.
It's going to
Okay.
affect the plankton. So the next step in the process, because we already spent years mapping seafloors, we're doing plastics research up in the Arctic too, by the way. We've been doing, we found microplastics everywhere in the Arctic. It sucks. It's not as bad as the Atlantic garbage patch or Pacific garbage patch, but it's up there. And we found a bunch up there. But anyways, now it's time to take all the seafloor mapping. The seafloor mapping makes us understand the seafloor better, which is there's a warmer, saltier water column coming up from the Atlantic, eating Greenland's glaciers from underneath, and it's about 300 meters down. So if you have a trough that's roughly 300 meters deep from the open ocean to the glacier face, it will be affected by this warmer water.
Okay.
And that was also part of what we've been doing. And great, right? It's all steps. It's kind of baby steps, right? So now we've been mapping here, we've been researching there. Let's pull it all together and understand the correlation between this and that.
I
And in
got
this
you.
case, the
Mhm.
correlation between the glaciers, the seafloor mapping, and the plankton. So yeah, definitely check out the website,
We will link to it.
oceanresearchproject.org.
Yep.
Yeah, and,
Yep.
and definitely we got some YouTube videos. We got a YouTube channel. It's not a lot on there, but we're going to start producing more material. We'll bring a cameraman on the next trip,
Sounds good.
and we'll keep producing more material.
Hey, I want to ask you, man, how old are you?
I'm 40.
All right, and you've like accomplished more than a lot of people twice your age. So I want to end it out with this. What's the next big goal? What are you going to set your mind to accomplishing next?
The long term goal is to create a global fleet of research ready sailboats. It's not just about the one boat, it's not just about the Arctic. It's about the concept that because the technologies have gotten better, and particularly when we integrate the fully autonomous aerial and underwater data collecting robots, which are drones,
Okay.
underwater vehicles, this is the future. I mean, this is the future of science. It's going to be automated,
Mhm.
but the sailboat is an incredibly good platform to support. It's a support vehicle for those high technologies. So to integrate the old, it's funny because a sailboat is an old technology.
Yep.
We're taking this old technology that's much cheaper and much more environmentally friendly and integrating it with futuristic technologies of drones and underwater vehicles and blending them together. And if I can create a global fleet of research ready sailboats using these technologies, I can change in a small way, but I can change the way the research is being conducted in the ocean. And in a small way, I can change the world. And now, granted, I'm not saying it's some big thing, but that's how the world changes. How does the world change? It's from people doing little things, focusing their life on it, and all around us, every single day, people are changing the world. And guess what? Those
Yep.
people are no different than you. They're no different than me.
Absolutely.
They're just people, and they have determination, they have perseverance, they have a goal, and they're willing to work hard and sacrifice for those goals. So that's my goal, man. I want to change the way research is conducted in the ocean by creating a global fleet of research ready sailboats, integrating those technologies.
Well, I'm betting on you. I mean, this has been, man, this has been extremely, extraordinarily inspirational. I know people are going to get a lot out of this. I would like to ask if we can, check in with you periodically because
Sure.
what you're doing is something that I think people need to pay more attention to. And hey, we're gonna put this up. We're gonna splice in some, stuff that you're doing that's out there that we can grab and just show people what you're doing. But I thank you tremendously, Matt, for sitting down with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. Okay, everyone. I'll talk to you soon.